Yeah. Profanssportspodcast. Let's get it. Profan. Tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Profan. Tune into the program. Profan. Tune into the program. Profan. Tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Yo, what it do, everybody? It's your boy John Altidor with Profan Sports Podcast, back at you with a special segment with my boys Vlad and Barry and Jared Weiss, who is a writer covering the Boston Celtics and a host of the Grant and Taco Show and Daily Ding podcast at The Athletic. He's covered the Celtics since 2011. He co-founded CLNS Media Network while in college before covering the team for SB Nations and Celtics blogs USA Today. So this guy's been doing a lot. He's responsible for a lot of the Celtics content we actually discuss on this platform right here. So we're super appreciative and glad to have Jared Weiss in the building. How you doing, man?
That's really cool to say. I didn't realize that, but I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we
No
got to
problem,
do a little
man.
research, before guys come on here,
Well, I appreciate that. I'm excited to get talking with you.
Yes, sir. You said you were out in Cali right now. How's the weather over there?
It's really hot today. It's funny. It's been really hot up in like the Pacific Northwest in like the hundreds, while it's been pretty cool here in LA. But today it's scorching. So hopefully that'll pass pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's 97 here right now. So I think we're all melting, as we're trying to do this podcast over here, man.
Yep, start of another heat
And
wave. I've been hearing.
For sure, man. And like I said, welcome to the Profan Sports Podcast, man. And let's get right into it, man. You're a writer for the Celtics, and you cover a lot of things. I believe I read your article on The Athletic about Ime Udoka, becoming the new head coach of the Celtics. Today, he actually came on and did a whole press conference for the team. So let's talk about the Celtics a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Celtics right now, especially the new coach we got in-house?
They're in a really interesting spot, right? I mean, Ime Udoka came out on Monday and he talked about how he's ready to really kick their asses. That was the word he actually used. And I thought the phrase he used that was most interesting was he said, "I like to bring out the dog in people, and we got a lot of young dogs on this team." And I feel like that's the main focus of the Celtics situation right now, is that last year they weren't playing with that dog mentality that they had the year before that made them so good, and they needed to find a coach that would really bring that back out of them. And Udoka just seems like the perfect guy for that. I mean, he was one of the guys that I think everybody had pretty high on their list early on as someone who's really known as somebody who is both tough but also really empathetic and can really connect with people and really has that balance of traits that they were looking for this position this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know too much about Ime at all until the coaching search started, right? And it seemed like he got hired pretty quickly here. And I did see the press conference where he did say he's going to bring the dog out in the team. Do we have any dogs on the team other than Marcus Smart?
We'll find out, right? Jaylen Brown is definitely that guy when he really wants to be, for sure. I think he's one of those guys that gets really feisty defensively, loves to put pressure on guys, force turnovers, attack the rim. He can be that guy. Jason Tatum he's more of a kind of like laid back and patient to a degree, but he'll get right up in there and throw it down when he needs to. I mean, look at what he did in the playoffs where he was getting to the line like 14 times a game. He was leading the league in free throw attempts per game early on in the playoffs. The dude has that dog in him. And then you look around, like Grant Williams is a good example of someone who really loves to play with physicality. And I think the further he gets into his career, the more he'll be allowed to do it because he's not a rookie anymore. And I think that's going to make him a much better player as time goes on, as well as him just kind of learning how to be physical without actually fouling. And like Rob Williams is another dude that loves diving on the floor. loves racing, loves flying in for rebounds, loves fudging, attacking the
No
rim.
worries.
Oh, no worries, man.
Yeah.
Right,
So yeah,
right. Do your
motherfucker likes to
thing,
throw it
man. Do
down,
your
right?
thing.
So
That's right.
and so yeah, so like I think they, there's just plenty of other guys to go through, sure, but like I think those guys are the guys that you definitely see as part of the future core, and those are guys that I think like to be aggressive. But we'll see if Romeo Langford and Aaron Neesmith and Peyton Pritchard's probably categorized as a dog, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
his
was
whole
just
thing
gonna
is
say him
being as
too.
tough
Right.
as
Peyton is a
possible.
dog. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes, and that's John's boy right there. That's his guy.
that's
Yeah,
right.
he's
Day
like a
one.
Chihuahua-sized pit bull off the leash, right? So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think they got the people there, and like I never felt like the issue was that the roster needed to be blown up. I always felt it was just that the roster needed to be healthy for one. I know a lot of people that probably follow my work or hate me or whatever think that I've been trashing this team and all that because they think they suck. It's like no, it's not. It was mostly that they just had horrible health last year, but there definitely were a lot of things that weren't clicking between the coaching staff and the players just not being on the same page, stuff like that. So like there's plenty there, but that's stuff that can be fixed pretty quickly, especially when you have a new coach.
How much do you think his past experience working with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart with Team USA had to do with him choosing the Celtics?
A lot. Well, I mean, I don't think maybe that did at least give him a sense of I know these guys and I know whether or not I can work with these guys. But I think it's more the other way around. It's really more about Tatum and Brown and Smart choosing him. And that was the big thing I was hearing right before he got hired. I had heard right before he got hired that he really had the blessing, especially from Smart and Jaylen, who were really enthralled with him after working with them in Team USA. So I think those guys and Tatum as well, knowing that he's like it's one thing to know that someone like played under Greg Popovich or coached under Greg Popovich, but you still don't really know what their coaching style is going to be like. I mean, we've seen a lot of these guys that come from the Popovich tree kind of go about things fairly differently than how Popovich does, right? And that makes sense. Not everybody that learns from a mentor or from a boss acts like that person. I had a boss a couple bosses ago that at a previous place that I worked that I frankly would never do anything the way that they did it. So, it's like you don't know for sure what he's going to be like. But I think these guys have gotten enough experience under him, and he was not shy about who he is. He was not talking about how I'm going to try to fit the mold, and he was not talking about how I'm going to try to follow in Brad Stevens' footsteps. He even had that joke where he's like, "We ranked 27th in assists last year. Sorry about that."
Yeah.
It's very clear.
Brad.
And this is exactly what we thought the Celtics would do, because this is what they tend to do. They want to find someone who they believe in their personality and their approach to how they conduct themselves, and instead of forcing them to conform to who's already in place above them and how the team works, they want to empower that person that they believe in. I think I do believe that that's something that's kind of a central tenet of how the organization works, and I think that's probably why they went with Ime.
Absolutely, man. So I heard a lot of reports on Brad will probably bring somebody that, is kind of like him, shares the same kind of philosophies. And watching the press conference, it seems like that's where we're headed. But, we got a guy with a little edge to him right there. Speaking of Brad, he just made the transition from head coach to the president of basketball operations, and he's made a couple moves, which I feel like the Celtics Nations is all about it. How do you think Brad Stevens is doing so far, in his new position?
See, I mean, just to go back to the first thing you were saying, I think Brad Stevens is the kind of person who is, I think, open-minded enough that he doesn't think I have to hire someone that has the exact same values or perspective or manner in which they want to operate as I do. I think he's the kind of person that recognizes I want to just bring in someone who I think is right for the situation and who I believe that they believe in themselves and will do things the right way. Because I think Ime is a pretty different type of coach from everything that we're hearing. I mean, just the way that he talked in that opening presser. I mean, I'm sure a lot of that was kind of planned out in how they want to do the messaging with PR. I mean, that's how things, tend to work. But it doesn't mean it's inauthentic. It's just that they wanted to kind of more carefully craft their messaging. And that's a lot. Brad, I think, presented a lot more humbleness. And I haven't gone back and watched his introductory press conference, but Ime didn't sound like he's someone coming into the situation thinking, I want to learn from the Celtics organization and how to be myself. It was, I want to bring myself to the Celtics organization. And so I think that's maybe a different way that people were envisioning this kind of hire compared to than what people were expecting from Brad originally. And so to answer your second question, or it was your only question, I do think that bringing in Al Horford will be very productive for this team. He is the kind of player that they need in this moment. He is the player that will reestablish the defensive principles and defensive accountability and the excitement to play defense that seemed to be missing from the team last year. Again, as someone who watches every single game and breaks down all the film and stuff like that, I honestly couldn't tell you if their struggles last year were more because of lack of availability and roster turnover, that it was just players generally not really getting on the same page with the coaching and with each other. It's because that's what it looked like, but it is pretty easy to write it off to just availability and injury and stuff like that. And so Horford, I just think, is the kind of person that will get everyone on the same page throughout the roster to the point that it will smooth over a lot of those issues. And so from that perspective, he'll be really helpful. The big question is, how does the offense work with him at probably the 4 a lot of the time next to Rob Williams compared to when they had 4 guards/wings out there before, when Kemba Walker was there. And, Kemba Walker, for all the struggles that he had last year, he was still really good. He still averaged about 20 points a game. He wasn't shooting like 20% from the field like Marcus Smart was a lot of the time. Like, he was still good. He just wasn't at the level that you expect out of a max player, and that we know he is when he's healthy. And so maybe this team is better off with someone who, honestly, I don't know if Al Horford is as impactful of an offensive player even when he's fully healthy right now compared to Kemba Walker, who certainly isn't playing at 100%. I don't think he is quite as impactful, but he can be used in a very different way than Kemba can, where if Marcus Smart is going to be able to stay composed and stay cautious in how he runs point, because I think generally Smart tends to be kind of less wacky and out of control when he's point guard, and he knows he has to be more responsible for the team's offense. Maybe Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's growth as playmakers, assuming Jaylen is good to go early in the year and the wrist thing isn't hobbling him, maybe the offense is better structured without Kemba Walker being the main point guard, because they just don't need that point guard anymore because everyone else has gotten better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've heard a lot of things about making Marcus Smart the starting point guard moving forward, right? In the press conference with Ime, he mentioned that he'll be talking to Jason Tatum in Tokyo soon. Is Ime coaching this summer?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's still on that staff. That I think this is
Wow.
Popovich's last tournament before he's going to leave that post. I think, is Coach K taking over? No, that can't be right. He's retiring. I think he used to be the coach. I can't remember who's taking over right now. But yeah, maybe Ime will still stay on. I mean, now that Ime is a head coach, a lot of the time they bring in head coaches from around the sport, but then the assistant coaches tend to be the assistants from the main coach's staff. So maybe Udoka will stick around. Okay, maybe he'll end up being the next coach sometime down the road.
Do you think that's beneficial?
Beneficial for him to be on the Olympic team? Yeah, I mean, it got him
to be the head of the Olympics.
It certainly helped him get the Celtics job. I mean, obviously, being the head of the program obviously is one of the biggest honors in coaching. It's extremely valuable, but just even being there, period, is really important because it gives you a chance to show other players, other top players around the league, this is what it could be like if you came play for me in the NBA. So, assuming he's a good coach and he doesn't turn them off to him, that is great advertising. It's a great audition.
Earlier, you guys were talking about him saying he wants to bring the dogs out of some of the guys. He was there before Kawhi Leonard become Kawhi Leonard, do you think he's gonna be able to turn one of those guys, either Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, into a Kawhi caliber player?
That's a great question. That's exactly what I asked. Well, it's essentially what I asked. I asked him, what did you learn from being around? Obviously, you played with Duncan and Manu and Parker and Boris Dia, most importantly. Although I don't know. I think he was coaching on the team with Boris Dia. But he coached Kawhi as Kawhi made that ascension. He coached Joel Embiid last year when Embiid kind of, even though the team struggled, I feel like Embiid kind of turned that corner to being a superstar and obviously this year's MVP caliber player. Obviously this year, he helped guide a team that was destroyed with injuries constantly throughout the year, and they were still unbelievable, and they probably still would have won the title if Harden hadn't gotten hurt. So, I mean, he's got a lot of experience around these top-tier players, and he's seen what it takes. And he also built a career on stopping those guys, right? I mean, he was one of the main guys that guarded Kobe pretty well, or at least as well as he could guard Kobe, and a lot of the other top players. So I think he's well-equipped to try to help Tatum and Brown hit that next level that we know they can do. I mean, it's still pretty early in their careers, right? I mean, guys don't hit their prime until their 7th or 8th season usually. Jalen's heading into year 5, Tatum into year 4, right?
No, I think it's year 6 and year 5.
Year 6 and year 5. You're right. Yeah, they just finished those. Yeah. So so Jalen's starting to approach that stage. He's still in his mid-ish 20s, so he's got a little while to go. But I mean, we see pretty clearly Tatum is on that Kawhi track. That's pretty obvious. I mean, the guy, I think he had more 50-point games than pretty much anyone else in the league by the time this season actually ended. I mean, that's right. It's one thing. It's one thing to have a bunch of 30-point games and put up like big points per game numbers, but to be able to hit that 50 mark in these huge games where your season's on the line, to do that in the play-in game, to do that in game 3 when you had to win that game or else the season was over. I mean, he has proven that he can step up and elevate himself to that highest of levels like Kawhi can, and maybe 7 or 8 other guys in the NBA can do. I know people always talk about top 5, but in reality, it's more like a top 7 or 8 generally. Maybe you can try to differentiate in those top tiers, but maybe in the playoffs, there's 3 guys or like KD, Kawhi, and LeBron. I feel like every year in the playoffs kind of separate themselves as they're gonna perform at historic levels every single time, and maybe not everybody else is guaranteed to do that. Tatum could get to that level, but we know at the very least he can get to that MVP tier. I think it's pretty clear that he can get there if he keeps doing what he's doing now. And Ime definitely will, I think, give him that edge. I mean, that's the thing that we've been waiting to see is he doesn't have to. I know there was that ridiculous talk during the year about him having to be louder and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't have to be that, but he needs to be more aggressive. And we started to see him do that. And I wrote a lot about that. I talked to the people that work with him about that stuff and put that in a few stories. I mean, that was the big thing was in the NBA, you have to physically dominate your space. And he's learning how to do that. And the more he does that, the more he's going to get better. And eventually he'll be like Kawhi. Kawhi was kind of like a quick athletic player who was really determined early on. Now he's like this monster where guys just like bounce off of him constantly, and Tatum is becoming that guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. I look forward to seeing those guys take that next step because I think that's really important in the next coming years.
Absolutely.
Right. We saw Ime talk about the 2 pillars in the organization that we got to work around, which is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
Edwards?
Oh yeah, Tremont Waters. And when you think about duos in the league, we see a lot of guys that play for each other and make each other better. Do we think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can get to be one of those tandems?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, Jalen's they're both all-stars already, right? And they're pretty early in their careers. So, I mean, they're pretty obviously going to, maybe they'll get to like Kawhi and PG. It's possible. That's probably as high as it gets for wing combos in the NBA. Unless there's like LeBron and D Wade together, but that's obviously extremely rare. But I mean, these guys should be, it's still clearly a potential championship core when you get the right pieces around it. I don't think there's any question about that. It's more just a question of can they get the right pieces around it, and can they hold this thing together long enough for them to develop those pieces.
Right.
Yeah,
And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, Jared, like speaking of getting those pieces around those two pillars, Tatum and Brown, what's next for this team? We clearly see there's still a lot of holes on the roster, a lot of things that need to be done in order to build it to be a contending team in the East for the years to come. So where do you see the team going from here to build this roster this offseason?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is actually focusing on how those two play together, because you can't be operating in your ISO silos. You can't be taking turns. You need to be able to run actions that flow off of each other. And I wrote a story. I've been in LA covering just watching the Clipper games for a few weeks now, and what really stood out to me is how much better Kawhi and PG are at playing off of each other now. And one thing I think they do that's really cool is when they get into transition and they're running out and the defense is backpedaling, a lot of the time, whichever one of those players is ahead of the break will start trying to get a mismatch and just try to seal him off into the paint and post him up, get really deep into the paint so they can just catch and then turn and shoot really easily. And they're really, really good about trying to hunt that out constantly. And I think that's a more effective way for these two stars to play off of each other than the Celtics. A lot of the time it's one guy's at one wing, the other guy's at the other wing. They run an action in one place, then maybe kicks it out to the other guy, and then they flow off of that. And that's a pretty standard structure, and the Clippers do plenty of that too. But it's got to be more complex than that. And so that's one of the main areas where they can really grow, and that's how they can really, really get better. But then, if you look at the roster right now as it's constructed, the roster is pretty fine. It's just the question is how much better does it get when everyone's together? Evan Fournier, things couldn't have gone much worse for him, honestly, last season when he came to Boston. So that's the big question is how much better is Fournier going to be when he's healthy, when he's had time to learn the defensive scheme, which seemed like it was a real issue. So I think that's the first thing that right there. Rob Williams will probably be a lot better again, right? He made a huge jump last year. Presumably he'll make another noticeable jump this offseason, assuming that his foot is okay, which I assume it will be after some rest. So there's plenty of growth to happen on this roster. That's even before getting into all the first-round draft picks from the last couple of years. I mean, Romeo Langford and Aaron Nesmith will probably turn into rotation players this year, which they were a little bit, but not a ton. So, this roster can definitely get a lot better just by staying in place. I just think the concern is that the ceiling is too low on this roster as it is, and they'll definitely want to try to take some big swings both this offseason and next offseason.
Or like Damian Lillard, you think? Everybody's talking about.
Dame time.
Everybody, Damian.
They can get Dame. They had to give up Jaylen Brown, obviously. You can't trade for an MVP caliber player without giving up a young all-star. You're obviously not going to trade Jason Tatum. Why would you do that? Then you just become the Blazers.
Yeah.
Right,
so makes no sense.
And you'd rather have Jason Tatum than Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is much, much further into his career, is owed insane money as he hits his 30s. You want, and Tatum's a two-way player. So I think Tatum can probably be as good as Dame in a couple of years, honestly. And which I don't think should be controversial. He's been on that path. So you can do that around Jaylen, and you probably have to include a couple of those young guys, and then probably even a couple draft picks. I mean, we're talking about an MVP caliber player in his prime right now. So, I mean, I think the biggest question, I just wrote about this, I think yesterday on The Athletic. The biggest question is Tatum ready for that? Because if you make that trade, you're trying to win the championship right now. You have to your best shot at winning the title is this upcoming year, because Dame's already in his 30s, so things are going to start going downhill pretty soon. I mean, at least most of his game is basically just pull-up shooting. That's the majority of his game, so I don't think that won't go down as much as his finishing ability. So that's good at least. But I think Tatum probably is there. I don't know if he's definitely not at his peak, but he's probably just good enough at this point that you could win a title if things really break your way. But even if they make that trade, they're so capped out right now. It's how do they retool around Dame to make that happen, assuming they deplete a lot of their depth? So, I mean, what's good is when you make that kind of deal, we saw with Brooklyn, a lot of good players want to come join you for cheap. So maybe that is how it's going to work. But they would, if they're making a trade for Dame, they probably have to trade in a lot of their youth and go with vets and just try to go for it right now.
Absolutely. With the season last year, it was not only the injuries. We saw a lot of COVID, positive COVID tests and guys. I think the Celtics had, the most guys miss time due to COVID. And just in the last day or so, I've been hearing a lot about the team not taking the COVID stuff seriously. Can you shed any light on that? You think there's any truth to that?
So it's funny that came out because I was on with Chris Mannix on NBC Boston, and when he was saying that, I couldn't believe he was saying it because I heard all the same stuff, and I didn't think other people knew about that. So
Thanks.
I have heard it. I have not verified it, but I definitely heard it too. I think a bunch of people around the league found out that Scott Brooks went to the NBA and said that the Celtics were out partying on South Beach in Miami right before they played Washington, and that he thinks that the Celtics gave him COVID. And so I looked into it. The timeline definitely could plausibly line up, but I think the main thing we learned from the COVID outbreak is that trying to pinpoint someone as the culprit for starting a spread is pretty much impossible to do so with 100% veracity. So that's why I had to put it out.
Look who doesn't have a job now.
That's why he doesn't have a job.
That's true, right. So I couldn't get himself a new contract with the Wizards. No wonder why they, wanted him out of there and didn't even want to bother renegotiating the contract, to keep him as the coach of the Wizards. And I'm sure Bradley Beal didn't want him there either.
I think Beal liked him. I know Russ wanted him back. That's for sure. Russ definitely wanted him.
Yeah, that's Russ's guy, of course. Yeah,
that's Russ's guy. Yeah. So I know the accusation is accurate. For the accusation did happen by the Wizards, as far as I know. We don't know if it's true. It's an accusation at this point. But I definitely agree from everything that I've heard. Not enough that I've heard that I would definitely put it in a report, but just enough that I've heard that I think it's reasonable to speculate that it's true. Is that the Celtics, I think, had a really robust protocol for managing COVID safety within the team activities and the team spaces and stuff like that. But then when they left the facility, it was kind of out of their hands. Sorry, my AirPods just fell out. When they left the facility, the players were it was up to them to manage things themselves, and that's how they wanted to do it. And it sounds like they weren't being as safe as they should about it. But it should be said that pretty much every team is going out when they're on the road. The big thing is generally how it works is teams throw parties, like the players will throw parties with friends and girls or whatever, but they get testing done on site. So they'll spend a small fortune to hire a doctor to run a PCR test at the entrance, basically, where they have the results done in 10 minutes, so you could know if it's safe or not. So that's safe, right? I assume that's a safe way to do it. Yeah. And now everyone's vaccinated.
Sure, it is.
Most guys are vaccinated, so you don't really need to do that anymore, I'm sure. But obviously during the height of things, that was important. But we just, we should have known these guys. Okay, so we don't say the Four Seasons. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't get to say the Four Seasons every time I hit the road. I don't get a VIP booth in the club every single time, only half the time. So it's
I do all the time,
Exactly. But so it's we're not used to a certain lifestyle. So the idea of losing that doesn't seem as crazy, but you get used to whatever your normal situation is really quickly. So if your normal situation is staying in 5-star hotels and getting the VIP treatment everywhere you go and all that stuff, it's still difficult to deal with having to take that away, even if it is incredibly lavish. It's, as much as you want to tell someone that they should have self-awareness and appreciation and whatever, that kind of stuff, sure, you can, while still being really frustrated and upset and bored and kind of, miserably bored all the time, that you can't do what you're used to doing. And so I could see why these teams, or these players, I should say, like, wanted to try to get around it as much as possible. I get why they did it, even if it wasn't the right thing to do necessarily. And I think at least generally teams around the league tried to make sure that their players were doing it in a safe manner.
Yeah, I mean, our team was pretty young, Our stars are, early 20s, and then you got the one guy in Kemba who's older, and I don't think he's going to tell these guys, hey, I don't think he's going to tell them not to go party or anything like that. He's such a nice guy.
Right, and I even heard an interesting rumor about that I don't know if you can confirm this, but apparently Kemba's house was the spot that, the Celtics, players would go have fun and, and bring, some people over and, and do their thing. That's what I've been hearing from my sources. I don't know if you can confirm that.
Yeah, we got sources.
True or not, but that the word on the street as far as what, people and, and what I've been hearing is that that's what, the deal was that Kemba's house was pretty much, the spot for the players to go and have fun and a good time and, and live it up and do their thing.
I mean, I heard that he hosted dinners. I haven't heard about him turning his house into a nightclub. So, hell, maybe he did. But I know, like, what I was told is a lot of the time it's just guys getting together and having dinners. And they're doing it in, like, back rooms at restaurants where they can do it safely, stuff like that. So I think that's what most of it was. I don't think it was them throwing ragers and stuff like that all the time. I think it was probably a little bit more reasonable than what you would expect.
Do you have to go pretty soon, Jared?
Sure, but let's keep rolling.
Okay.
Cool. Sounds good.
I might be the only crazy NBA Celtics fan asking this question, and I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be like, "Why?" But what is the value of trading for Ben Simmons?
Good question. I mean, so the thing is, especially on this team,
because I think his value might be a little lower right now. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, it's a lot lower right now.
Little's an understatement of the year.
But it's still high. Like, he's still a young all-star.
Exactly.
It's still.
Yeah. So I think it's that Ben Simmons
even right now at this moment, as bad as he was in the playoffs.
Well, like, as bad as he was still good. And he's on the wrong team. Like, it's obvious he needs to be in a different situation.
Yeah,
he can't
put him on the Warriors. It's a problem.
And the Warriors are probably going to trade for him. Let's be real. They're probably going to send.
Put him there. He's going to be a problem.
So
who they're going to send or who they're going to give up? Well,
so they can't send Philly James Wiseman, so they have to find a third team. But they can find a way to make that deal work, I'm sure. They got the seventh pick. Seventh pick's super valuable. I bet they could find a three-way deal where they send Wiseman and the pick to another team. Other team sends maybe Washington. Maybe Washington will, maybe Brad Beal decides it's time. He goes there. Maybe Portland will send C.J. McCollum. Probably not C.J. McCollum. I don't think his value's that high. But maybe Dame. Maybe that's how Dame gets moved. Maybe Dame goes to Philly. The Simmons goes to Golden State. And then all that stuff goes to Portland, and then, like, Philly sends some other stuff to Portland. Maybe that's how it gets done. I'm just coming up with that at the top of my head, not reporting that. But so I'm sure there's some more realistic. Yeah, that seems a little crazy. Maybe some more realistic stuff. Basically, for Boston, Ben Simmons is a center. So Ben Simmons has to be a big man. Maybe you can play with the four, but you can't. He has to be the only non-shooter on the floor. So if you wanted to do a deal where you include Rob, obviously you would trade Rob Williams in that deal because Rob Williams he would be a backup center for you at that point. But I think Simmons makes sense on the team where he's the only non-shooter on the floor, and you're basically using him as a big man rolling to the hoop and stuff like that. So there's no longer this issue of him driving from the perimeter and the team sagging off of him. Use him in the pick and roll so that the team has to defend the ball and he can roll in behind the defense. And then he could be an incredible role man. So I think that's probably the future for him if he goes to a team like this, or he just goes to, like, Houston and they just blow everything up and they just build around like him and Christian Wood and Jay Sean Tate or whatever else. I think those are probably the most plausible things. But it seems like Simmons probably needs to be somewhere where everything can be built around him the way it is in like Milwaukee with Giannis.
I see.
It's a good point. Good take.
Yeah,
I had heard you, Jed. You and Chris Mannix talked a little bit about CJ McCollum and his chances of possibly getting traded this offseason, and Boston being one of the teams being traded that could trade for him. Would I think honestly that would be more suitable for the Celtics than Damian Lillard, because if they have to trade for Damian Lillard, they'd pretty much have to give up the farm, like you said, and give up a good chunk of their roster in order to do that. So do you see CJ McCollum getting traded to? And besides Boston, what other teams would could you see him making a move for CJ?
The Knicks for sure. I think they definitely could use a player like him, and he's from New York and definitely would love to be back in New York for sure. I think his fiance or wife, I can't remember if they're married yet. I think she lives or works there. So I can't remember if he's from New York or he just likes to live in New York in the offseason, one of those two. But so I'm sure he would love to be in New York.
Everybody loves New York.
Sure, it's New York, right?
Right, exactly.
Yes,
All
I
the
mean,
LA,
big players love New York.
Yeah, so I think the Knicks are a great fit for him because he's kind of an upgrade over Alfred Payton and Derrick Rose, right? He's a better version of a much better version of those kind of players.
I'd say so.
Yeah, although they love D Rose down there, so who knows? But so that's a good fit.
That's his guy right there. That's his man. That's his right hand man. So
yeah,
I don't think it's gonna be hard for him to let go of D Rose. He loves him some D Rose, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just read about this on The Athletic. I think McCollum's a good fit in Boston. I'm sure fans are probably a little fatigued with the point guard carousel that there's been over the last few years. And Kemba was the first one who actually played below his talent level when he was actually back out there. But so McCollum is kind of similar to Kemba Walker in a lot of ways, I think. Definitely a little bit different, but the way that the spots of the court that they use when they're, at least when Kemba's at his best, the way they try to navigate the paint, I think that they have a lot of similarities. And Kemba Walker, when he was healthy, the team was really good around him. It was not an issue of Kemba Walker offensively doesn't fit with his team. It was just a matter of Kemba Walker was not hitting his pull-up shots, couldn't get to his mid-range game this year that much. It's just about that stuff. And McCollum can still do all that. Now, one big concern is his senior year in college, he broke his left foot. Then a few months later, I think about 9 months later in training camp, he broke it again. That was fine. Had a great career. Last year, broke it again. Came back, and he was. So I think he had played about 13 games at the beginning of the year. He's averaging like 26 a game. He was playing his best basketball. He was at his peak for sure. He was in his prime, at his peak. Gets hurt, comes back, not scoring at the same level. In the playoffs, shooting like 9 for 21 every single night, 9 for 23 every single night, scoring 20 points, 5 dimes. Good numbers, but not good enough when you're this. Not only are you the second best player on your team, you're on a team where the offense is like completely concentrated between him and Dame. Like they do most of the offensive work, and then I guess Norm Powell to a degree. So I would be scared, right? Because the Celtics just got burned again by another max point guard not being healthy. And I think that is the biggest hurdle to training for McCollum. I don't think it's even his contract. I don't think it's that you'd probably think about Marcus Smart, but you honestly probably wouldn't have to give up much more than Marcus Smart. Maybe they're willing to trade Smart's defense for McCollum's offense. I could definitely see that being worth it. I think it's really just about the knee, and that's the main, I think, reason not to do the deal. Or sorry, not knee, foot.
Yeah. No, we got you. No, I appreciate the answer to that question, but I don't know, because it's like he played a lot of two guard and a lot of off ball and stuff, as opposed to playing on the ball and running the point and running and initiating the offense. I was mostly Dame Lillard, so I don't know how good he'd really be at, actually being a full-time point guard and, and running the point and, initiating the offense and pretty much, being a kind of a floor general on the floor. So that's a question that, a concern that I would have about that as well, since he hasn't done it that much, to this point of his career. But I mean, I would certainly take that chance if, if the Celtics are willing to make that trade. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think he can definitely, make this team better and would be an upgrade at that position, since they do need an upgrade as of right now, particularly at point guard, after shipping Kemba Walker to OKC.
Yeah, he's played a lot of point as the second unit point guard when Dame's sitting, although Dame doesn't sit that much. So I've seen enough that I think I'm pretty comfortable with him doing it. And that's assuming Tatum and Brown are going to take a lot of the playmaking responsibility off. I think that's a big thing with this team is, maybe we'll see if they bring out a really, really top-tier playmaking point guard and we see that they play a lot better with him. Maybe that's fine. But I think this team needs more so a really good scorer that's a solid passer that can get the ball in flow to Tatum and Brown rather than someone who's completely orchestrating the offense. And frankly, not a lot of point guards out there anymore that are really real quarterbacks. It's not really done as much. I think it's really done from the wing position a lot more. There's Chris Paul for sure. There's a few other guys like that, but like the point guard position is almost more of a scoring position than it is a playmaking position in a lot of ways nowadays.
So that means Kyle Lowry. Is that somebody?
Lowry's somebody for sure. I think the two concerns are that one, you'd have to sign, what is he, like 34 at this point?
35. Yeah.
35, yeah. So Kyle Lowry wants a bag at 35 for several years.
Oh, no.
You can't get into that business right now.
We ain't doing that.
You can't do that. I love Kyle Lowry. He's one of my favorite players of this era, but the team is, you don't know that the team is at that point. Maybe they do. Maybe they think the team is just Kyle Lowry away. But the problem is that they can't sign him. They don't have cap space. They can't do a sign and trade. They don't have room in that trade exception. So I don't see any way they can get Kyle Lowry unless Kyle Lowry decides he wants to sign for the mid-level, which we know he doesn't. We know he wants that back.
Nah,
so I don't see any way they can get Lowry. And I don't know if they can even do a sign and trade for Lowry. Even if they wanted to pile together, maybe they could and still keep Evan Fournier and somehow stay under the hard cap. But when you do a sign and trade, you get that hard cap, which is like, I want to say $6 million above the tax level. So you can't go above that when you do a sign and trade. So it's pretty hard to pull that, to get Kyle Lowry in here and still pull that off.
What do you think about Alonzo Ball? Someone like Alonzo Ball, you think, he can make Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown better and be a good fit for this team?
So I have to go in a minute, but same thing. You can't get them sign and trade rules. So Lonzo's going to get
a free agent. Sorry,
he's a restricted free agent. So it's just that's what a sign and trade would be. Is you can't sign him as you don't have the cap space, and you can't sign and trade for him and stay under the you can't stay under the tax or the hard cap most likely, because he's going to probably get a lot of money. He's probably going to get at least $18 million, I would imagine.
That's true. He is going to get it back, definitely.
Yeah, but maybe if they let Fournier, I have to double check after the Walker trade, but maybe if they let Fournier go, which you would do, I assume, if you're signing Lonzo Ball, they're too similar in their roles. Maybe you can pull it off. And I really like Lonzo Ball's game now. Now that he's kind of figured his shot out a little bit, he's such a good defender. He's such a good hustle player, smart passer. He would be a really good player next to those guys.
I have one last question. Are you a soccer fan, Jared?
I am. Are
you watching the Euros right now, or were you watching the Euros during the weekend and today?
So please don't spoil what happened in extra time between
Oh
France
my God!
Because I'm about to go watch that. I'm on my way to a meeting.
Awesome. Are you rooting for anybody at the Euros?
No, I'm American. I love the French team going into the World Cup last time, but now that they won it, I can't root for the team that's the favorite anymore. So
Yeah.
I guess Denmark is a team you have to root for right now after what happened to Eriksson, right? Like, that's such an amazing story. So
True.
I guess I would love to see Denmark win it.
Nice. Awesome.
One last question for me. Jared, you're doing a lot of things, in the sporting industry, and as a podcast, we're definitely trying to do things like, kind of trying to make our way. What is an advice you have for, guys like us who's trying to create a platform?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the first thing is just trying to be as unique as possible. That there's so many shows out there nowadays. There's so much content out there nowadays that if you're trying to follow the model that works and you're too focused on that you lose your sense of individuality, that's going to kill your chances of being successful. I mean, you need to do something that's different to separate yourselves. When I can't even find a new podcast half the time because it's too overwhelming how many podcasts there are. So I think it's really all about, there's nothing better than a few people that get along and have really fun banter and have great energy off of each other. So don't worry about taking turns and not overlapping. Argue with each other. Go at each other. Have fun with it. Be crazy with it. That's what that's what matters most. But also, it's try to come up with a really unique topic and try to approach. If you want to talk about a main storyline, I would probably just go around, see what other people have been saying, what other pods have been talking about, and then try to figure out a way to do it completely differently than what they were doing, or focus on it from a completely different lens than what they were doing. Because, a lot of people, they'll try to do the opposite of that. They'll try to do what everyone else is doing, but maybe they'll try to have some sort of crazy incendiary take or stuff like that. I think people get bored of that. It's very obvious when you're doing stuff like that. I think it's all about just trying to find the most unique perspective at the end of the day.
Gotcha.
Okay, nice. So we're going to name the podcast today, Kemba Walker Turned House into Nightclub During COVID.
That is a unique angle. I don't know if it's true. It's a unique angle.
Barry, do you have a last question for Jared?
I did have one question. I just wanted to know, what do you think happened at the end of Danny Ainge's time as the Celtics? What went wrong, with the, with the team and, and with Danny, and why they, ended up having to, part ways and pretty much go in a different direction.
Yeah, I've heard every single concept speculated about whether Ainge was pushed out, whether he wanted to retire, who knows. So I don't really know what the truth is. I've heard so many different stories at this point from people. I've read so many stories that have been published. It's impossible to know. All I know is it didn't seem like everybody was on the same page in the same way that they were in the past, for sure. And I think the Kyrie situation, where Kyrie left them and they had to kind of panic to figure out what to do on the fly, and that didn't work out, even though I thought the Kemba Walker signing was a great signing at the time. Because he was coming off of an incredible year and several great years, and I didn't have an MRI of his knee, so I had no reason to expect his knee was going to fall apart on him. I think Kemba Walker was exactly the player that they hoped he would be when he was healthy, and I think he continued to try to be the best player that he could be, and the best person in the locker room that he could be after the case. I know I put out a report about a lot of the issues that he and Brad Stevens were having, stuff like that, but I think at the end of the day, he was universally beloved by his teammates. I think everybody on the coaching staff respected him. I think he and Brad liked each other and and admired and respected each other, even if they weren't, from everything I heard, working together as well as they were before, and as well as you would want to be with one of your best players. So, I think that was mostly just the unfortunate circumstances that they were in. And so, maybe a lot of the stuff that happened with Ainge was probably not completely under his control, but I know that when he had those comments in that radio interview about how he hadn't had anyone come to him about racism around the team, that pissed off a lot of people because it was just so insanely obviously wrong.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Nobody believed that, because I've had people talk to me about that stuff all the time. I've had conversations in the locker room about that stuff. Marcus Smart wrote an article about it, and the players should be. I'm like, come on,
it's well documented.
Yeah, it's well documented.
Exactly.
It's something that anybody in Boston should know. And if you don't know that and you live in Boston, then you gotta kind of open your ears a little bit more, and you gotta talk to people a little bit more that are different than
Right.
you, and try to learn their perspectives. That's last year and a half when Black Lives Matter has taken off, and even before that, I was constantly having those conversations. I'm a white guy from Boston, so it's important for me, if I'm going to be a productive member of my community, I got to talk to other people that are different from me in the community to understand why they're having issues in this community and why it needs to get better, so I can be a part of that positive change. And so, or even just to help communicate to the world what needs to be changed or what they're trying to change. So, I think the Celtics organization cares about that stuff for sure. And I think Brad Stevens has been pretty adamant about supporting the players and everything that they've done. He's been pretty phenomenal about that kind of stuff. And they've done a lot of stuff for sure with the players, the team, all that kind of stuff. So it's not like the team doesn't care or take it seriously, but I know that something I've heard from a lot of people is that the front office needs more diversity. And it seems like, from everything I'm hearing, that's something that they're going to try to work on. And there's going to be some changes to the front office to bring in more diverse voices at the higher levels, because they haven't had any in a long time.
Absolutely. And,
that's
the
a
Celtics,
great point, Jared.
Yeah, the Celtics seem to be at the forefront of these things, when it comes to the changes around the NBA anyway. Jared.
Well, not according to Jay Williams.
Oh my God, that was so dumb.
What's funny about that tweet? I looked back, and the Celtics. So Bill Russell was the first black coach in 1967, right?
Yeah.
They've had a black coach every decade since then. So
that's right.
Not only is he not the first black coach, they've had a black coach every single decade. So it's not. Yeah, this organization has never shied away from putting a minority in a position of power on the coaching staff, but they haven't had any. I can't think of anybody in the front office. I'm sure there's been somebody at some point, but part of that is that they just haven't had a lot of front office turnover, honestly. But it's something that I think Stevens is working on now, and they're going to try to make progress on that.
Absolutely, that's the way to go.
That's good. That's what's up. That's what I like to hear.
Yes, sir. Again, thank you so much, Jared, for coming on Pro Fan Sports Podcast and giving us your thoughts on the Celtics, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to keep reading the work. It's all really great stuff, and we definitely look up to you. Again, thanks again for coming through, man.
Man, that's crazy to hear. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate your time and you coming on this podcast with us and talking Celtics and NBA. So it's good to see you again, and and good to have you here. We appreciate you.
Barry, I'll see you back at the Garden someday soon, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna try to get back there next year. Hopefully by the start of next season, I'll hopefully be back there, working there or as a fan. So I'm gonna try to get in there soon. So hopefully the next time I get back there, I get to see you and and run into you. That'd be pretty awesome. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
And enjoy your time in LA. Have fun in LA.
I will. See you guys.
Cool.
Nice. Good interview, guys. Awesome. Good
That was
stuff.
very good.